Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki Nigamo Kapadurgaritam Padam Shukumakaramita Dravisamitam Pibata Bhagavatam Rashamadayam Nigamo Hora Hora Sikabhuvi Babakaham Krishna Swadamapagate Dharmaganahi Shaha Karonashta Dvishamasha Paranako Dinoditaham Twamapia Dabashuta Vishwatam Vibhu Samapya Yanabidam Bidiksaram Prakyahidaho Maharajaram Sanklesha Nirvana Musanti Nanyataham Anarto Pashamam Shakshad Bhakti Yogamatokshada Lokashajana Jyotiram Chakre Satparasamitam Atmanamaste Munaya Nigranti Harpi Urukamani Korbanti Apitir Yitam Bhutam Gunahari Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinubandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhikanta Namostute Jayatam Sarato Pango Mama Mader Mader Gati Matsavasha Parambo Jarada Madan Moharam Seeman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsi Vadakarsan Venoshan Rupya Gopinathasriya Snaham Divyad Vrindarani Kalpadrumada Srimad Radnagada Shima Shanaso Sri Sri Radha Shila Govindada Prasadavi Sevimana Mana Shmanami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chajigari Taya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Maham Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Adraja Mangalam Padire Kaksho Manganaya Tano Hari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Cha Vidmahi Vishnu Padija Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Saraswati Hari Pare Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Dadite Tapti Kanchana Gaunangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanasute Devi Pranamani Hari Pare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Praskita De Satarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. This is Wisdom Wednesday. Welcome one and all. Bring you up to date on happenings of the Spanish for Christian Temple. We had a film crew from BYU, Interfaith Council, here for a couple of hours yesterday, headed up by Mike McKay, a gal named Janae, a fellow named Atticus, and one other fellow who spent most of his time outdoors filming with a drone. And he even came indoors for a while and filmed, had the drone flying around inside the temple room. That'll be interesting. We've never had a drone inside the temple room filming. That'll be interesting. So they were here for a project. It had to do with mapping the various religions in the area, getting firsthand accounts from the founders and the heads of different religious groups, how they came to be here, what their theology is, lifestyle. We had a very good interview. Janae was the interviewer. I was the interviewee. Quite a few questions, probably 30, 40 questions. I don't know how long it's going to take them and whip all that into some sort of presentable form, but we'll be the first to know and you'll be the second to know. It'll be on YouTube, readily available for everybody. That was our outreach for yesterday, aside from the restaurant and people coming and going, yoga class, et cetera, et cetera. Today, it's called Hobble Creek Elementary School. They invited me to come from 2:45 to 3:30 to explain Hinduism. I have a good slideshow now that I present before school tours, both coming to the temple and when I go there. I'm pretty chuffed about it. So it's getting good reactions from students who come. Today we're going to talk about how the Lord has no material birth, no material rupa, no material form, no material name, no material qualities, no material faults. And just trailing a bit from where we ended yesterday on the subject of the Lord not having any material birth and material name. Let me review for you the rendition of this verse. These are two verses in the third chapter of the eighth canto of the Bhagavatam, prayers of Gajendra, and I paraphrase those two verses. Let me just share them with you again. Krishna is Supreme Godhead, no birth, no death, no flaw, no defect, no illusion. In human form, he's the one I respect. Krishna Rāma, avatars descending down low, showing the way, helping the soul to grow. He manifests on this earthly plane to restore Dharma again and again and again and again. He's the Supreme Lord, defying comprehension, his actions divine beyond human dimension, saving the devotees, lifting them to the light, annihilating demons, ending their blight. Both devotees and demons achieve liberation of transcendental fate. One joins the Lord's abode, the other enters the impersonal haze. Don't mistake his actions for worldly affairs. He's nirguna, untouched by material snares. His names, like Rama and Krishna, hold power untold. Chanting them frees the soul, breaks illusions hold. Ajamil proved it, his story's well known. By uttering Narayan, his spirit was shown the path to transcendence, escaping the night. So chant Hare Krishna and everything's bright. Though he walks among us in human disguise, don't be fooled by appearances, open your eyes. He's not bound by Maya, this cosmic play. He's the puppet master guiding the way. His form is divine, his name is the key to unlocking the truth and setting you free. Rise above the mundane, the fleeting, the fake, embrace the divine, for goodness sake. As I mentioned yesterday, there's a ceremony 11 or 13 days after the birth of the child called the name giving, Nam Karana, Nam Samskara. A priest is usually invited and asked to suggest the name prior to 11 to 13 days after the birth. There will not have been any name spoken out loud. It's considered bad luck. So the name is going to be spoken by the father and by the priest at this ceremony called Nam Karana. So for Krishna's name giving ceremony, Krishna doesn't need to have any rituals done for him. Rituals are meant for the purification of the conditioned souls that are thrust into a certain body, a certain place, a certain location, byproducts of a certain family because of seeds they've planted in their previous lives, decisions they've taken, which may take quite a while to mature, the result of which may take quite a while to mature. Living beings are distributed from their past life according to higher calculations by the demigods. They're put into different situations in the future life based on their decisions of the past life. They packed within the womb for 9 months, an extremely uncomfortable situation. First of all, they're upside down, which, try standing in your head for 9 months. You'll know what I mean. They go into and out of consciousness repeatedly throughout the period of gestation. And then they're thrust forcefully out of narrow opening, squeezed through very painfully, come into light, and then they're slapped on the backside to get them breathing. They're full of blood. And then 11 to 13 days after they're born, they're given a name. And they live for 60, 70, 80 years. And when the body's gone, the name is gone also. Krishna's not like that. Gargamuni indicated that the names of the Lord are eternal. The forms of the Lord are not packed within the womb. They're not thrust within the womb due to material actions and reactions. Krishna himself is not dictated to. He's not supervised by the demigods. He's the supervisor. He's above the demigods. He sets the protocol for them. They don't set the protocol for him. So in no way, shape, or form, except on a few superficial levels, is Krishna's name or form comparable to our names and our forms. His forms are eternal. They inhabit their own imperishable spiritual planets beyond this material world. And each and every one of the names, because it's attached, it refers to an eternal form. In fact, it's non-different from that form. The names also are eternal. And that's why there's no more powerful process for purifying your heart and getting out of the cycle of rebirth ourselves and chanting the holy names of the Lord. Lord himself, his form, his name are not material. So if we want to lift ourselves up to that level of having an eternal name and having an eternal form, then we associate with the Lord through the chanting of his holy names. That way we're elevated his nature, which is that he doesn't have a beginning, he doesn't have a middle, he doesn't have an end. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Krishna establishes his eternality, his imperishability as the Supreme Personality of Godhead beyond time, beyond space, beyond the ability of material nature to atrophy him. But he also indicates that inasmuch as we're emanations from him, we're his parts and parcels, we have his very self-same qualities. The particle of sunshine has the same qualities, not the same quantity. The particle of sunshine is not as powerful as the sun, but there is a oneness in terms of quality. The quality of the sun globe, which are light and heat, are also reflected in the particle of sunshine, which also has light and heat. So God is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, and we're also eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. So by associating with the imperishable, eternal, infallible, supreme controller through the chanting of his holy names, we also attain to that very same qualitative nature as God. Doesn't mean we become capital God. It means we become small gods, or we become godly or godlike. Sometimes in the local LDS culture, they say we're in the process of becoming God. And of course, mainline Christianity takes umbrage from that with that, because it's heresy to say that you could become God. That's not what it's really meant. After spending 40 years in the LDS culture, I realized they're not talking about supplanting capital God, usurping capital God's throne. They know as well as anybody that God means one. There's no vacancy there. He's already got that situation covered. But what's meant when it's said becoming God, one's associating with God by serving God, one becomes godly or godlike. And if you're going to use the word God, it would be written small God as opposed to capital God. Actually, this film crew from BYU, we sat down, I offered them lunch, and we were sitting, eating, and Mike McKay was fascinated with Krishna consciousness. He asked about, he said he resonates with a lot of things in Krishna consciousness. But then again, there's the barrier, there's the obstacle, there's the hurdle of the differences in culture and the differences in angle and vision and so on and so forth. And so we were just speaking to the fact that Krishna appears in various incarnations in various ways and form. He's originally in his monsoon cloud-like bluish black form. That's the hue of his original body. However, from him comes the greenish avatar of Ram, the whitish avatar of Kapila Dev, the red avatar of Hayagriva, the yellow avatar of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as I said, each and every one of these avatars have their eternal names and their eternal forms in the spiritual world. So neither the name or the form is a byproduct of a certain contextual arrangement within this material world, but rather they come down to establish, to enforce their truth, their reality. Yada yada hi dhammasya glanir bhavatara bhutano dhammasya tarapanam. Whenever and wherever there's a discrepancy in religious performances, a decline in irreligion, a decline in religion, and an uprise in irreligion, at that time the Lord comes with his associates from the spiritual world to set to reset, to restart, to reboot everything, reprioritize everything when people have become too far astray. We talked yesterday about the Buddha. the time that Buddha appeared, there are a few phrases allowing meat eating under limited circumstances and precluding the consumption of flesh with a lot of burdensome rituals and performances and chanting. You have to build an altar. You have to chant so many mantras. If you're going to kill the animal, you cannot kill a cow. You have to kill a lower animal like a goat. You have to do it on the dark moon night so that you're going to be automatically ashamed and that no one else will see you committing this abomination. The purpose of all these strictures in relation to meat eating is not to allow it necessarily, but to allow it under certain onerous conditions so that the message is, don't do it. Message is, if there's so many conditions before you can put dead flesh in your mouth, maybe you should consider cutting out the habit altogether. You don't have to do anything prior to eating a chapati or 5 chapatis or 10 chapatis. There's nothing wrong with eating chapatis. There's nothing wrong with eating dal or rice, sabjis. You can just cook it, offer it, and eat it. Simple, straightforward, economical. But why there's so much that's required before eating dead flesh? Because you're planting bad seeds. You're planting seeds of violence, senselessness, lack of consideration, disrespect to others of God's creatures. You may very well have to take birth in that very same animal species in your next life. So no wonder that it's discouraged. It's not prohibited altogether because people will do it anyway. So the Vedic program is to give a path to meat eating, but also to gradually wean the person who's addicted to flesh off of that. But at the time of Buddha, people were taking these rare passages from the Vedas, they were throwing out the conditions, the discipline surrounding it, the context, and they were just making it more easy and more accessible to eat meat. We gave the example. When we think of the motor car, whose name jumps up? It's Henry Ford, right? Henry Ford's name is synonymous with the motor car. But Henry Ford didn't invent the motor car. The motor car was invented long before Henry Ford. He didn't design the motor car. There were many motor cars, many people driving cars before Henry Ford came on the scene. So why is his name synonymous with the motor car? Because he was the one that systemized the manufacturers of motor cars so that the prices went down and everyone could afford one. That's why his name is synonymous with the motor car. He didn't create the motor car. He didn't invent the motor car. But he created the assembly line so that the motor car was cheap and affordable. Otherwise, each car was made custom made. And the people who were making the motor cars, they had to know all phases of manufacture and construction. So they were experts. It would take them a long time to make a motor car, and it would require a lot of skill. So no wonder these custom-made motor cars initially were very expensive, very prohibitively expensive. And there were limited roads to use them on anyway. Henry Ford revolutionized the assembly process of motor cars. He didn't invent the car. He made it so that unskilled, very low-paid workers could just do one act every day. Car would come through on an assembly line and they would just put the quarter panel on. And then another car, put the quarter panel, put the quarter panel. Another group would have a lift and they'd insert the motor and tighten 4 bolts. Another group would fit the windshield. Another group would put 4 tires on just as it came past. And they do the one act every day. They're not skilled, they're paid, and then thousands of motor cars are made every day. The price goes down. Similarly, one is not meant to have meat readily accessible, just the opposite. But during the Buddhist time, people were going on the path to make meat easily available, to throw out any purificatory mantras or any consciousness raising processes by which one would get scruples in terms of continuing that habit. And they were just, and then if someone would challenge him, why are you eating so much meat? Or why are you killing this animal in broad daylight? They'd say, well, it's mentioned in the Vedas. They were using those few mentions of meat eating in the Vedas as an excuse in order to bring meat eating out into the open. And Buddha appeared to curb that. Now, because they were using the Vedas as an excuse and a pretext, his preaching technique was, I don't care for your Vedas. He rejected the Vedas. And rather, by the power of his personality, he established principles like metta, compassion, like ahimsa, nonviolence. And he captured people's imagination with his life story, the saga of beauty, Buddha. And he attracted them towards a more saintly, elevated mode of goodness lifestyle. And he had to do that by preaching atheism and rejecting the Vedas. But we learned that Buddha was none other than an incarnation of Krishna, coming more or less obliquely in a disguised form in order to indirectly lead people to a higher standard of cultured living. Examples given, there's some criminals, and the police department sends out a plainclothes policeman. The criminals don't identify him as a policeman. They just think of him as something else. And the plainclothes policeman gets their trust. Say, don't go to the police station. Whatever you do, don't go to the police station down that way. Don't go there. Come with me. I'll take you somewhere else. So he gains their trust, and they follow him, and he goes a roundabout way, and he gets them to the police station. Anyway, Buddha was Krishna, but recognizing that you cannot preach theism, you cannot preach the Vedas to people who are rank and file meat eaters, he, in an oblique way, in an indirect way, got them to give up the habit which was dragging them down and purify, clean up their diet in such a way that later on they would be receptive to the higher sublime truths of spirituality. So here in the scenario that we're talking about, where Krishna is getting his name, giving ceremony performed by the sage Gargamuni. Gargamuni is saying there is no need for Krishna to have a name-giving ceremony because you don't have to give Krishna a name. He already has the name Krishna. He's always had it eternally. He'll always have it. And the reason that he has and always had and always will have the name is because his form is not born as flesh and blood. He did not spend 9 months packed up in the womb of Devaki. He did not end up in the womb of Devaki because of bad decisions from a previous life. So the whole world of names and forms exists as an illusion in this material world. Sometimes this material world is called a world of names only. Someone says, true, what are you talking about? This world is solid. I'm knocking on this metal desk. I knock on this sheetrock wall. This computer is made of hard substance, the microphone, our bodies themselves. We can squeeze them. We can put pressure on them. All this seems very substantial, but Vedic literatures refer to this world as a world of names only. So let's look at the misleading and phantasmagoric and illusory nature of names. Take an example. From a distance, we look and we say, oh, that's a forest. We give that assemblage of greenery a name. From a distance, we call it a forest. But we can't tell someone who's standing nearby, bring me a forest. That's not possible. When we go closer, we see that there is no such thing as a forest. The name forest is illusory. As we go closer, we see that the applicable name is a tree or trees. Trees are called trees because they have a certain shape: oak trees, maple trees, pine trees, spruce trees. But then if you go closer, you see that it's not really so much of a tree. The substance of it, the essence of it, is not tree. Tree just refers to a certain shape. But what the tree is actually made of is wood. So a better reality than forest is tree. A better reality than tree is wood. But then you go and you look at the wood and you see that a better reality is the trunk. Most of the wood is situated in the trunk. But then if you zoom in even closer, microscopically, you will see that there's really not such a thing as a tree, but really what we call a tree is really just a bunch of molecules. So then you could say to your servant or your subordinate here, bring me. You're not going to anymore say, bring me a forest. You're not going to anymore say, bring me a tree. You're not going to anymore say, bring me wood. You're not going to anymore say, bring me a trunk. But you're going to say, bring me molecules. That's all the tree is. It's just simply a combination of atoms. Is some other party going to be able to bring you atoms? And then what of the atomic structure? It's 90% air. It's 90% space. So in this way, we can see that the names we're giving, forest, tree, wood, trunk, molecules, atom, and finally space, they're all temporary. The closer you go, the more you analyze, discern the reality of what you're looking at, break it down into its component parts, you realize there's no such thing as a forest, there's no such thing as a tree, there's no such thing as wood, there's no such thing as trunks, there's no such thing as atoms and molecules. It can just go on unlimitedly, infinitely. The whole creation, if you break it down, param anu, the smallest element that exists according to Sanskrit, and this is thousands and thousands of years before molecular biology, they said param anu described the indivisible particle as an atom. Now, everything is basically atoms. When atoms combine in certain ways to perform certain shapes, we give them names. But essentially, everything is an atom, and atoms are a constant flux, constant change. Atoms are taking different shapes constantly. So there is any name that you affix, you're just attaching it to a temporary phenomenon. It's like on the ocean, you have waves. Waves are created by the turbulence of the ocean, the tides, the wind, the moon. So imagine if you were to try naming each wave. This is George, this is Bill, this is Seymour, this is Susan, this is like we just had this hurricane, Helene. Well, where is Helene? Where was Helene 3 weeks ago, and where is Helene now? What's become of Helene? Well, we see the effects, certainly the path of destruction, but where is the destroyer? You know, the big bad wolf. Where is the big bad storm now? The whole existence, the whole lifespan of the storm was what? Really just a few days. We see negative effects of it, and we're full of dire forecasts as it's coming in from the ocean and preparing to hit the land. So we see the pre-hype and we see the post-storm destruction. But how long did the storm, how long did Helene last? A few days. And that's it. So what is this name Helene? It has no basis in reality, it has no substance. That's it. But that's not the case for Krishna. Krishna didn't just contrive himself from atmospheric conditions at sea and then get pushed towards the land and then after a few days dissipate. Where there was nothing, there is then again after a week or so, nothing. Krishna didn't arise like a wave temporarily from the ocean. And neither did Krishna's names come and go. Achyuta, Krishna, Govinda, Ananta, Keshava. Bhaktivinoda Thakur composed a song, Vibhavadiya Shesha. This is sung for Mangalarti in many of the Krishna temples in the world, in Vrindavan particularly. He composed a song just of different eternal names of Krishna. Vibhavari Shesha Loka Pravesha Nidrachari Uta Jiva Bolo Hari Hari Mukunda Murari Rama Krishna Hayagriva. All names, eternal names of Krishna. Nashringa Vamana Sri Madhusudana Brajenda Nandana Shama Bhutana Gatana Kaitaba Shatana Jaya Dasarata Rama Yashoda Dulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Purandara Gopi Priya Jana Radhika Ramana Bhuvana Sundara Bara Ravananta Kara Makana Tashkara Gopi Jana Vastrahari Rajara Rakara Gopara Vrindapala Chitahari Vamshadhari Yoginda Bandana Srinanda Nandana Braja Jana Bayahari Navina Nirada Rupa Manohara Mohana Bamsi Bihari Yashoda Nandana Kamshani Shudana Nikunjara Shabilashi Kadamba Kanana Rasha Parayana Brindavi Pina Nivashi Ananda Vardana Premanikana Pulajara Jojaka Kama Gopangana Gachita Vanodana Shamashta Guna Gana Dama Jivana Yamuna Jivana Keli Parayana Manasha Chandra Jakora Nama Shudhara Shago Krishna Jasha Rako Vachana Manomura. 8 verses. Each verse has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 10 names. So 80 names of God, just like 80 names, just rattle them off just like that. And in fact, they're only a sample, just a minor sample of all the eternal names of God, each one of which refers to an eternal form of the Lord. The conclusion is that, according to Gajendra in his prayers here, Lord, what Gajendra is saying, you don't have names like we do. Just as your forms exist eternally, your names also exist eternally. The name is not given after the appearance of a form which was generated karmically. And just by hearing your name, living entities become purified. Just by hearing your name. When we go out chanting in the public places, the aim is to benedict passers-by simply by hearing the name of Krishna. It's an extra if we get them to take some prasadam or get them to buy a book. But bottom line, simply by hearing the name, even if they're running away, even if they're trying to get out of earshot as quickly as they can of the Hare Krishnas, they still can't help themselves from taking in several of the names through the holes of the ears. And when that happens, the heart becomes purified, and one takes a step, even unwillingly, unconsciously, back to home, back to God. Think of Ajamil. Ajamil not only heard the names when he was young and living in the house of his Brahminical parents, but he also took those names of the Lord and gave them to his children, which he had with his common law wife. The youngest of his 12 children, he had named Narayan. So when it came to the end of Ajamil's life, he was lying on his deathbed. These horrible beings came from the abode of Yamaraj, encircled his subtle body with a noose, and they were about to drag him away for punishment. And in fear and terror, in fact, he was so terrified that he was on the verge of passing stool and urine. And in this terrified state of mind, with concentration, with focus, not referring to the Lord Narayan himself, but being very intensely focused on the name of his youngest son in terror, but in single-minded focus, Ajamila called out Narayan. Just like Gajendra also, in this life and death situation, Gajendra, just like Ajamil, there's a parallel situation here. Gajendra is losing his life. He's been fighting with the crocodile for 1,000 days, for 1,000 years. His strength has been ebbing inexorably. And he hasn't, whatever second or third wind he's got, it's come and gone. Now he really is at the fag end of his strength. Now really he is a tick away from dying, just as Ajamil was. And just as Ajamil in terror called out the name Narayan, similarly, Gajendra in terror, in a last extreme, as a last resort, is recalling the prayers from a previous life. Gajendra, Elephant King, in dangerous grip, recalled his mind stripped of arrogance, his history unzipped, recalled mantras from a previous life, cut away his attachments like a knife, formerly King Indraduma, now in elephant form. Yet his prayers echoed, weathering the storm. Mantras resurfacing from the past. Mantras resurfacing from the past. Transcendental sound awakening memories profound. Even if a devotee falls from the path, Krishna heart keeps track. The right time will take up the cycle, care what you lack, he will get you back home, back to God. This is what Krishna did. Ajamil forgot Krishna. He'd had a very pious, Krishna-centered childhood in the home of his devotee families. He got distracted. He got sidetracked into criminality and illicit activities, forgetfulness, degradation. Similarly, in his previous life, Gajendra was king in Nardumna. Very congenial atmosphere, conducive to the execution of spiritual life, but something happened and he ended up in the body of an elephant, and for 1,000 years he forgot Krishna as well. And yet, as it says, even a devotee falls from the path, Krishna the heart keeps track. The right time will take up the sack of Caru, will get you back home, back to God. So what happened for Ajamil is also happened for Gajendra. Just by hearing the name, you become purified. Just by hearing the name, one is free from more sins than one can commit. What to speak of those who are calling out the name, like Ajamil, like Gajendra? That's all they did. They called out the name of the Lord in a helpless situation. That was all it took for the Lord, because the Lord has always been poised as our witness, our overseer, our proprietor, and our permitter. He's always been just with us, poised to intervene, poised to rush in and whisk us away from danger. But we have been loath to invoke him. We wanted to do it on our own. We wanted to be independent. We wanted to have our own area of sovereignty. So when Ajamil came to that point, total loss of control, total helplessness, not having any say in his destiny, and when Gajendra also, despite his big body, despite his residence in heavenly planets, despite his wives and children, recognized that none of those were going to help him, and he was on his own, and he was in the last fag end of his strength, he also helplessly called out. Devoid of his fabled strength at the end of his rope's length, Gajendra's hopes turned to the Lord, who awards protection to his devotees. He stopped pulling on his leg, which the crocodile wanted to devour, and he plucked with his trunk from the muck of the lake a lotus flower and offered it, seeking the Lord's power. Krishna, the root of creation, the fruit of Vedas, the absolute truth that plays on your flute, the ever-existing youth. Your feet are adored by Lord Rāma and Shiva, who never leave you, not even for a beat. Your features are unlimited, the ingredient of all creatures. Whether they have hands, claws, jaws, or paws, they are all your parts and parcels. Those who are smart engage in your devotional service with all their heart. You guard those who never depart from the hearth of your sheltering breast. Lord, I confess I've messed up, repressed my service, failed the test, but I'm thirsty for your mercy, which is greater than my mistakes. I've heard that all it takes to awaken your protection is a single cry of helpless affection. Lord, in spite of my shame, I'm calling your name. In the middle of the fight, please reclaim me from the might of the crocodile's bite. When I'm released from the teeth of the croc, block ignorance from my life, lock me into your devotional service. Lord, let my original purpose rise to the surface. I'm knocking at your door. Lord, please keep me close from now until evermore. And then it says, when the Lord heard the eloquent prayers of the elephant, he steered Guru to the spot, and he sheared the crocodile's head with his body, from his body with his chakra. When the reptile lay dead and Gajendra was shed of his dread, he chanted. He resumed the thread of his prayers and chanted, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just hearing that mantra saves one from the most dangerous, lethal sorts of situation. The precedents are Ajamil, the precedents are Gajendra. Now, what to speak of those who chant the name of the Lord? And if chanting the name of the Lord gives such additional benefits, how about those who are serving the Lord, who live for the Lord, for whom the Lord is the life and soul? This brings us to the cowherd maidens of Vrindavan. When the demoness Putana, at the behest of Kamsa, entered into Vrindavan, transformed herself into a beautiful woman, and conned Mother Yashoda into letting her take Krishna and suck at her breasts in a private, secluded place. Yashoda little knew that Putana was a demoness in disguise. Yashoda little knew that Putana had smeared the most deadly poison on her breasts. So Yashoda, in her naivete and simplicity, was duped by the mendacious Putana and allowing Putana to take Krishna into a private room to suckle her breasts. Of course, her intention was to kill Krishna. But rather, Krishna not only sucked the milk out of Putana's breast, but he also sucked her life air. After which Putana reverted to her horrible, huge, demoniac form, and she fell down and crashed onto the ground. The cowherd maidens, headed up by Mother Yashoda, were aghast. They were aghast that unwittingly they'd subjected Krishna to this life-threatening, blood-sucking witch. They felt great remorse, and they immediately rushed to do purificatory rituals. They whisked Krishna away from the body of Krishna, and they bathed Krishna with cow urine, and they gave him marks of tilak, and they chanted the Swasti Vachana. They whisked him to the tail of cow. And it's funny because they are chanting the names of Krishna for the protection of the various limbs and torso and legs of Krishna. I've done this many times as a priest. When there's a newborn baby, the parents ask you to do the mantra of protection for the child. So you take a peacock feather, you touch the head, you touch the nose, you touch the eyes, you touch the lips, you touch the ears, touch the neck, touch the shoulders, touch the arms, touch the torso, touch the belly, touch the hips, the thighs, the knees, the calves, and the feet. And each time you touch a different part of the body of Krishna, you say a name of Krishna. Vamanaya Namaha, Parashramaya Namaha, Ramanaya Shringanaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Shankarshanaya Namaha, Anirudaya Namaha, Purushottama. That's exactly what this whole procedure was followed by the gopis. Because of the excess of love for Krishna, they took Krishna not as a supernatural being, but as a cowherd boy who, some or other, due to good fortune, escaped the attempt on his life by Puta. Some or other, by luck, maybe Putin had a heart attack, or who knows, some or other, by luck, he dodged a bullet, and now they're thanking God for saving their little child Krishna, not realizing that Krishna is God and he doesn't need saving. He was never at any risk in the first place. But it's so charming, so captivating, that the gopis, in the simplicity of their yoga maya, of their love for Krishna, have totally disregarded the fact that he's God, that he doesn't need any help, he doesn't need any prayers or protection. And they're in the aftermath of the death of Putana and the salvation, so to speak, of Krishna, they're touching the limbs of Krishna's body and chanting mantras consisting of Krishna's names in order to protect Krishna. May Krishna, may your feet be protected by this name of yours. May your hands be protected by this name of yours. May your biceps be protected by this name of yours. May your neck be protected by this name of yours. There's an irony there, which is ultimately endlessly, unlimitedly charming. You know, So attractive are the feelings of the gopis for Krishna that Krishna sent Uddhava, his best friend and greatest devotee and most intimate confidant, to Vrindavan for several months to give, number one, to give his message of consolation to the gopis, but above and beyond that, so that Uddhava could uh, study the over and above surpassing attachment and love for Krishna that the gopis had. Our time is up on this Wisdom Wednesday. I hope that you've enjoyed our discussion here. We didn't really get to the discussion of the qualities of Krishna or the fact that Krishna is free from dosha, free from material defects. We've got more subject matter to churn next Monday, but we covered quite a bit of interesting material and I believe got somewhat deeply into it as well. Thanks very much for being our partner. Let me go to the Facebook comment sections and see what you have to add here. Charles Knuckles, a former professor from BYU in anthropology, who spent a lot of time in Tamil Nadu and while he was there learned to speak Tamil, says he's watching from Manila in the Philippines. Shout out to Charles and his wife Janice in the Philippines. Yes. When I first met Charles, he came to the temple. He'd just come to BYU from South India, and we exchanged contact information. And I was tickled that his email was balaji@gmail.com. Balaji is the name of the Krishna deity in the Tirupati temple there in Tamil Nadu. Or maybe it's in Andhra Pradesh, I don't know. Brent, rather A.K. Balabachandra, recently initiated in Silicon Valley by His Grace Vaisheshika Swami. He's the first one to jump on. He's our rock. Thank you. Thank you for your consistency. Thank you for your stability. Thinking of Bhakti Bread having come all this way to the point of initiation warms my heart. Makes me think that we're doing a little bit of good here in Utah. Bye, Bobby. Again, Charles Knuckles from Philippines. Ram Kishore, your man carried himself well last night, I thought. Yeah, Minneapolis. I didn't realize that Minnesota was number one in this and number two in that, number one in this, number two in that. You guys have a lot of plumes in your hat. Utah is also the same way. Utah is number one in a lot of categories. Apparently, you've got good governance there over in Minnesota as well, if we believe all the statistics that Tim Wolf's quoted last night. Rama Kishore further comments, in the Rosicrucian version of Christianity, the whole purpose is to awaken the Christ consciousness within your heart and living as Christ, as God on earth. Yeah, that's what the Mormons are saying. Not that you're going to become God, but you're going to become godlike, or not that you're going to become Christ, but by following Christ, you become more Christ-like. And that's just a fact. It's not rocket science that if you associate with anybody, you assume their qualities. It works for good, it works for bad. And the Lord being absolute is non-different from his name. So if you associate with the Lord through his names, then you assume godlike qualities of truth, compassion, love, sensibility, integrity, and so on and so forth. Another comment by Abraham Kishore. As a Freemason and knowing the influence it had on the Mormon faith, not surprised by yeah, that's true. Joseph Smith is said to have had a Freemason background. It all makes quite a bit of sense. We actually use the word demigod. We don't say you become God, but we say you become a demigod. That way there's less confusion, I think. So Brent says, of all the places in Utah that should be shown by a drone, he picked up on what I said about there being a drone inside the temple room. Of all the places in Utah that could be shown by a drone, the Spanish Fork Temple Room is the one that can take you back home. All you have to do is hear the sound vibration that resounds from the place brought to us by A.C. Bhaktivedanta, His Divine Grace. Nice. Nice. I'll let you know when the film comes out. We'll be able to share it and post it on our YouTube channel. Ram Kishore says, hope to see you in New Vrindavan this weekend. I shall not be there, but you enjoy it. You enjoy it. That is it for Wisdom Wednesday. Thanks very much for joining me. Have a great day. Punctuate your day with the chants of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rāma, Rāma, Rama Hare Hare.